Studio A3R. I am your host, Jennifer Sertl. Studio A3R is dedicated to feature people and resources that help strengthen personal resilience, responsiveness, and reflection. It is my belief that your competitive advantage is the way you scan your environment and make decisions. I hope our program helps you make better decisions. Leda Glyptis is our guest today. I met her in 2016 at a conference put on by SWIFT. For those of you that aren't familiar with SWIFT, SWIFT is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Anytime you do an international transaction, you usually get a SWIFT code, and that is that organization. We were both part of the financial technology think tank called InnoTribe. I've been an admirer of her voice and impact for such a long time. I had no idea how a conversation about the future of money would actually be so immediately timely. Before we get into the conversation, though, let me tell you a little bit about Leda's background. Leda is serving as Chief Client Officer at 10X, a cloud-native core bank provider. Her role is to look after sales, marketing, partnerships, as well as delivery across all clients globally. Leda is a former banker, technology executive, and founding CEO of 11FS Foundry, where she led the growth of its modular core digital banking offering. Prior to that, Leda was Chief Innovation Officer at Qatar National Bank, the largest bank in the Middle East and North Africa. Before QNB, she served as director at business and technology consulting firm Sapient, focusing on digital transformation and emerging technologies, and led EMEA innovation at BNY Mellon for some years. Leda joined BNY Mellon for the fintech startup Great East London Software, where she served as head of services and development. She holds an MA from King's College, Cambridge, and an MSc and PhD in London from the School of Economics and Political Science. And it's so exciting to have someone that has such vast knowledge in terms of fundamental international business, banking business. And it really, before we knew financial technology as hashtag fintech, she actually was one of the ones that was actually looking at business models and evaluating and judging the fintechs that would actually create so much value. So it's an honor to have you here, Leda.
It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here. And I must admit, as you sort of talking through my bio, all I can hear in my head is, God, I've been doing this a long time. And I have. And it's been a hell of a ride, but we're nowhere near done. And you're right. Some of us have been doing this since before it was a cool, sexy thing. And yet quite a lot of the work we're doing hasn't changed very much.
Well, and congratulations on your recent publication, Bankers Like Us. For those of you listening, we've been working on getting a schedule over the last 3 months to try and find the right time that she could squeeze in to talk to us. And it's really, to be able to make impact. She's already had a 15-year career in fintech. And to now have a voice of it, she is an eagle. And so I think we're going to learn so much. So how did you go from being a chief innovation officer from one of the largest banks in the Middle East to your role as humanizing banking?
Yeah, I'd like to think that the work I've been doing for the last 16 years has been about building those bridges between technology, what banking is for, and the humans doing the work and the humans we're doing it for. If I look back to the beginning of my career, we didn't have that language, but we were talking about transformation, user-centric design. We were trying to bring things together in a way that had new ways of working and new, more inclusive business models. And I think we were all a bit shy to use that language of inclusion and access and fairness. But with the fintech revolution, that language has become more and more and more accessible. So for me, as I was going through the corporate side of my career from BNY Mellon and Sapient and QNB, I had been reaching out into the fintech ecosystem and community more and more for partnerships, for ideas, to bring people in to do certain concepts with us inside the bank. So I was beginning to get a louder voice into the ecosystem while I was surfacing some frustrations and looking for opportunities. And through that connectivity, I got the opportunity to come back to London, because I had relocated to the Middle East at the time, to be part of the conglomerate that set up 11FS Foundry. So with 11FS and DNB, the Norwegian bank at the time. And it was it was the opportunity to eat your own dog food. It was the opportunity to say, you know what, you've been talking about doing fintech, transforming the work, actually the technology and the ways of working you would be putting in place if you had a blank sheet of paper. Here it is. And I haven't looked back. I spent a couple of years with 11FS Foundry, working in very, very close partnership with DNB. And then just shy of 3 years ago, I moved to 10X, which is it's a much bigger player in that space, right? Solving the same problem, but it's a dedicated, we do one thing and we do it well entity in that cloud native core banking space. And it really, really gives you the opportunity to say, you know, all those things that we believe about technology really unleashing our ambition and not being the thing that holds us back, technology that can underpin genuine transformation of your business model, of your cost model, it's possible. And here is one way of doing it. So that was a long answer to your question. I think the short answer is a combination of serendipity, grabbing the opportunity when it materialized, and being at the right place at the right time.
You know what I love about the way that you respond to that is the idea of what is the job to be done. I think the problem with so many entities is they try and capture a platform without having a core competence and really saying no to things that are not part of their core competence. So what I see that you have done with 10X is really gone to an area that's so absolutely clear on what they're the world's best at, and helping them be better at what they're the best at, which is fantastic. You know, the terms decentralized and distributed are terms relatively new in my vocabulary. I would say I've been using those words for the last 3 years, and, you know, more from a software to systems now to ecosystem. But how are decentralized and distributed in the fintech world changing the landscape?
I would say, and this is where my friends who work in DeFi will start screaming at me, because I'm not going to say something that they like, but here we go. I'm the one with the microphone, so I get to answer this question as I see fit, right? I think it's fair to say that the ways of working and delivering technology and services in finance has been highly centralized for a long time. And that has been partly because of our risk models. That has been partly because of the business models that were a bit of a fortress mentality, bring it all in and I'll hold it all in. But it was also part of the data governance models, and partly because we didn't know any different. We didn't have anything different. In a pre-API world, what you did with data was you gathered it and you kept it. The idea that you might do something different with it, we might share it and parse it and have it drive decisions is fairly new. So the start of our world was fully centralized. And then when we started playing around with the notion of decentralization, it was very closely coupled with DLT. It was very closely coupled with the notions of distributed ledgers, the notions of smart contracts, the mechanics of working in that DLT world. And I think that was the first version where we're like, okay, look at all these things that become possible if we start being decentralized in our governance and technology. And I think there is a third step, which is, Web3 and DeFi that are talking about genuinely decentralized finance in a very abstract way. But I also think there is a step in between, which is where the majority of the technology and industry is now, which is what are the advantages of decentralizing certain components of our architecture, of decentralizing your databases, which can be done with technology that isn't DLT technology. You can have that distributed architecture that creates better resilience in your data end-to-end. And decoupling the two allows for the conversation about what are the values of decentralization to not be so closely wedded to the crypto world. Because the crypto world puts a lot of people on edge. It puts some regulators on edge. It puts quite a lot of banks on edge. It also puts a lot of fintech participants on edge. It has a particular culture, the crypto world, let's face it. And it's I find that it's useful, and I've always said that throughout my career. It's useful to understand technical capabilities so that you unshackle your imagination. And it's important to solve, exactly to borrow your words from earlier, the job to be done. The job to be done, married to what you now know is possible, is how you work out what you need. How you deliver it is the last piece in the puzzle. So as we're talking about decentralized and distributed finance, for me, the two big questions to answer separately is, are we decentralizing and distributing the capabilities through which we deliver the service, we ensure resilience, we ensure our disaster recovery, we lower the cost to serve? Or are we talking about governance? Because when we start talking about decentralization of governance, then that's a whole different conversation.
Wow. So much here. I'm going to relate it a little bit to my work. I'm the director of marketing for Sertl Optics, and we were doing a WeFunder campaign. And one of the things that we had a challenge on getting new people to invest. And we then decided, well, why not actually have people invest that are already on the platform to take away the barrier of them having to learn this new technology. So part of kind of linking it into what you said is that when you were looking at progress, you were looking at ways to make existing language, like the idea of the crypto and this decentralized, there was so much complexity that you had to find a way to decouple it to take away some of the learning curve and risk, lack of understanding for people to greater participate. Did I get that point accurately?
I think you did, yes. And there is so much complexity that could hide under one word. I think it's super important to be clear about what we mean, and not put everything in one bracket, because someone might be very, very comfortable with decentralization in terms of architecture, but not decentralization in terms of governance. So do we have language to talk about the two separately?
That's so very helpful.
Yeah. Very happy to talk about decentralized databases, but they don't want to put them on distributed ledger technology. Do we understand that that's possible? Because it is. And I think having richness in the language of what it is we talk about and what commitments you have to make and what options you have, I think we have gotten a lot better in our industry at learning about new things, but not always at disseminating that knowledge so that people can go, okay, this is useful for me and I want it. This is not useful for me and I don't want it.
So the really important points here are, whenever, if you're listening to this program and you're leading a transformative experience in any aspect, really looking at people's associations with existing language, seeing how there are new words with new information, and the idea of distributing the information. Many of us, and I think one of the things that you do so well is you're really great at distributing information, right? Because we sometimes, not everyone's, I think, able to absorb and translate one, or are they reading and doing, it's not really one of the questions I'd planned to ask, but how do you manage to stay so current in the stream with all of these, different business models? How do you do that?
I think there are sort of there are three answers to that, and they're all true at the same time. I think the first one is, unlike many of the people who have a platform in our industry, you and I have a day job, right? There are a lot of people whose job is to be analysts, to be thinkers, to be futurists, and they do an insanely good job of that. But I have a day job, which means that I'm constantly faced with real problems. And the real problems tend to be much less glamorous than the futuristic open-ended view, but they tend to constantly give you a reality check. So the fact that I'm still in the trenches is very, very helpful for seeing what's out there, what is moving fast and what is not. Like, I can tell you, decentralized finance is not the number one problem of real financial institutions out there right now. There are other things that are on fire. That could be something that will be on fire in 5 years, but it's not right now. things that are on fire right now are about unit economics and how do you manage your cost to serve in a cost of living crisis, in an environment where people need access to money and don't have money, with systems that are aging and are becoming very, very expensive to maintain, and the need to innovate your systems that requires upfront investment. That's what's top of mind. So to your point, having that day job that forces you to constantly come into contact with the people doing the work keeps you current. The second is a very, very well curated reading list and set of podcasts where you spend the limited time you have listening to people who do the work, who think deeply about it. And the last thing, which I found with my blog, and I actually found with the reception the book has received so far, is if you bring it down to basics and you strip out the peculiarities of what happened to the basic human pattern of your experience or the basic business problem you're facing, everyone else is on the same boat. Their day might look a little bit different to yours, but the specifics of the challenges they're facing are so likely to be, if not identical, highly, highly, highly likely to be similar.
It's so very helpful. You've done an incredible job helping outline some of the structural challenges to this technical adoption. I'm really interested in human nature as human nature. What do we need to do differently to really be able to manage some of those challenges that you just articulated? Like, what is the human aspect of thriving in this much complexity?
I think, we've talked about this so much before. Complexity and uncertainty suck for humans. Even the people who are adventurous and like tackling with the unknown will have a favorite pair of pajamas and a comfort meal they make themselves after a long day. Humans are not designed for thriving in sustained periods of stress. It's bad for you. And by a combination of circumstance and choice, our industry is in constant stress. So I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is that we're putting humans in a situation that is not conducive to sustained, clear, transformative thought. So how do we better support our teams? How do we set ourselves up better for that kind of work? That's one thing. The second thing, which I talk about in my book for some length, at some length, is do we have our mechanisms for learning, not just when we're looking for a lesson, but when the lesson is looking for us? So the industry has gotten better at saying, okay, what's DeFi? I need to go out there and learn what DeFi is. We've gotten better at that. We're not as good at saying, okay, well, we just had a crisis or a set of unexpected circumstances, or a system didn't behave the way we thought, or whatever. Before we go into damage limitation mode, what can we learn so that we don't repeat those mistakes next time? We're not very good at that. And those factors, those behaviors of managing the stress under which our people do work, managing the ability to absorb learning so we don't repeat mistakes, these have nothing to do with digital transformation and everything to do with actually creating a better working environment for people, which will also be conducive to better thinking and more creativity, which will also help our digital transformation.
I think the neatest thing about those solutions is that everybody wins from them. It raises, the entire ecosystem, which is something that is so important. We all know diversity is good for business. There's an abundance of data proving it. Why is it so hard for us to, I really admire your work and a friend of ours, Theo, who just does a lot of advocating for women in business. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important for you to be recognized as a thought leader leading this charge of the way forward. But what can we do to, really help increase the way our voices are heard in this landscape, leading this change?
When I speak to women who've been doing this a long time, and particularly when there's intersectionality at play, when there's non-white women or openly LGBTQ members of a community who are also non-white, like people who are representing a category that for whatever reason hasn't been included. The minute you talk to someone who represents more than one of those categories, exhaustion is the first thing you get from them. It's just so tiring to be constantly battling exactly what you said. We know beyond the shadow of a doubt that diversity is good for business. We know that diverse boards make better decisions. We know that diverse workforces have higher resilience, higher short-term and long-term profitability, higher degrees of innovation, higher degrees of sustained risk management. We know that. We have a body of evidence that stretches back 20 to 25 years that proves it without the shadow of a doubt. And yet when SVB Bank, Silicon Valley Bank had its issues, there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that questioned the presence of veterans and LGBTQ folks and a Black person and 2 women on the board as maybe a distraction. Now, you could argue that that was clickbait, but actually the voices that were like, yes, tell you that we have had 20 years of working hard at this and we're nowhere near done. So the question is, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to let the other half of the population in the room and let them do what they do and accept that they may make mistakes just as you do, but actually all in all the numbers suggest that you'll be better if they let the rest of the population in through the door? And I think part of it is demographic bias. People tend to like people who look and sound like them more. Part of it is systemic bias that, if you women are told often that they don't sound as authoritative because they're pretty or they have a higher pitched voice. So there is a lot of systemic assumptions in place that have been at work for such a long time. And we have to go against people's own conscious and unconscious biases. So what could we do about it? We could call out aggressions, micro and macro, when they happen. We need to stop proceedings and go, that's not okay, and be comfortable with the fact that that will be uncomfortable. We need to be allies. We need to do it for other people, not just when it happens to us, but when it happens to anyone, including white heterosexual men, who will be talked down for being young or for having a working class accent. This exclusion of certain parts of the population isn't peculiar to one group. In fact, if you actually think about intersectionality, the vast majority of people are silenced. So we need to be allies to each other. We need to challenge behavior that might not be intentionally closing someone off, but having that unintentional effect, constantly and consistently calling it out and being allies for each other.
So I think I really encourage my community to read Bankers Like Us. As you can hear from the responses, there's such actually 20 years expertise in actually having been part of like the largest bank in the Middle East, as well as in the trenches, and really bridge building both the language and understanding, and with a real deep commitment to not alienate people. What I like about Bankers Like Us is that it allows, just like on this conversation, you're hearing really concrete ideas of what you can do. It is a book of how you can make a difference. It is a book of relatability and the idea that you're not alone. It really is really kind of a playbook for change makers across all industries, but banking in particular. You have been listening, and you have been listening to Leda Glyptis, author of Bankers Like Us, also prolific writer every Thursday, #Leda Writes. She, over the last 3 years, I've actually been reading her writing every Thursday, which is a breath of fresh air. And so I also want to acknowledge our producer, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockvox Studio in Rochester, New York. Our music is from Anthony Molina, and you can reach me at jennifer@agility3r.com. And of course, on Twitter, you can find both of us. Thank you for joining us.